If we could, if we could all move towards our tables, that would be great. Well, good evening. I think we almost have a quorum, so we can start this evening. My name is Mark Howard, and on behalf of the Fixed Income Analyst Society, I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's Hall of Fame event. This is going to be a fun, relaxing, social evening to honor three innovators and pioneers in the fixed income marketplace. I wanted to talk briefly about the agenda. Then we can all dig into our dinner and enjoy some wine. And then after that, just around the dessert time, I'm going to come back, say a few words, and then we'll get on with our award recipients. So without further ado, I'm going to go back to my table. We're going to start eating. But once again, welcome to the dinner, and we'll be back in a few moments. Interrupting your discussions. I hope everyone's having a good time. In the interest of time, and before the bar closes downstairs, we want to get on with the program. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I hope everybody has had a great time so far. For those of you who are not aware, FIASI, the Fixed Income Analyst Society, is a not-for-profit professional society that sponsors events, lectures, and gatherings to promote the fixed income profession. We have accomplished this since 1975 by inviting experts from different disciplines to present timely and important topics for discussion and debate. We also achieve our mission by providing career guidance, mentoring, and professional networking for our members. I encourage any of you who are interested to look closely at tonight's brochure, which is on the table, to get an idea about the details of events that we've been sponsoring recently, as well as those that are upcoming, the benefits for members, and the ways for interested people to get involved with FIASI. Our board takes the selection of Hall of Fame members very seriously, and we conduct a multi-year appraisal process of worthy candidates. This year, we believe our nominees embody many of the criteria that we deem critical to inclusion in this highly selective cohort: integrity, achievement, innovation, and legacy are just a few of the words that come to mind when we think of Glenn Reynolds, Bob Auwaerter, and Lim Chow. At a more personal level, I've had the privilege to interact professionally with each of these recipients. Glenn was one of my first bosses early in my career. I think it was back in the 1960s, wasn't it, Glenn? Although he certainly was a taskmaster, I learned a tremendous amount from him, and I'm very grateful for that. Bob Auwaerter was the second member of Vanguard's fixed income team some 30 years ago, when assets under management were just $2 billion. $650 billion later, he and his team have built a powerhouse that is the envy of many in the fixed income business today. Chow holds the distinction of being the first international recipient of this Hall of Fame award. Amongst sovereign wealth funds, GIC has been the leading pioneer in the utilization of rigorous portfolio construction and management techniques in the fixed income marketplace, and he has been one of the driving forces behind that. I'd like to take this moment to raise a glass in honor of all three new Fixed Income Hall of Fame honorees. And now, to get on with the fun part of the evening, I'd like to introduce Peter Pettis, who will say a few words about Glenn. Peter?
Thanks, Mark. I'm just going to rearrange the furniture a little. It's definitely a great pleasure to be here, and on behalf of CreditSights, I'd like to extend our congratulations to Bob and Chow Kiat as well. Glenn is in very fine company this evening indeed. You can probably tell I'm a little excited to be here. I think it's because standing up here on this podium is probably as close to one of these awards as I'm going to get. So I'm going to just enjoy it for a little while. You have Glenn's bio in front of you, but I thought I'd give you a little bit more color. I don't know much about the pre-Lehman days, but he refers to his early career as an auditor for Deloitte as a case study in excitement. Exciting, in fact, that a job offer in Newark, New Jersey looked good. At Pru, Glenn worked on such low-end sectors as steels and oils when those collapsed in the mid-'80s. He also worked on autos, including post-bailout Chrysler when it returned to the junk market. Pru had been the lead creditor on the bailout, so that was pretty risky politics at the time. More importantly, while at Pru, Glenn met Mary, who he married a few years later. They've now been together almost 25 years and have raised 4 beautiful, charming, and quite accomplished daughters. From Pru, Glenn went on to Lehman Brothers, which is where I met him in 1988. That was a long time ago. That's where I met Mark, too. Glenn was part of the commercial paper group that led the transformation of Lehman Brothers in the early 1990s under the leadership of Chris Pettit, a great man who unfortunately passed away well before his time. Glenn quickly rose up in the ranks, covering crazy names like Columbia Gas and Chrysler again, and pretty much any complicated credit in any sector. He was named head of global credit research in 1993 by Martha Dillman, who retired the following year. I'm pleased to say, though, that we coaxed Martha back out of retirement a few years ago to run research at CreditSights, and she's here with us tonight. At Lehman, Glenn helped the firm continue its domination of fixed income research. There's probably enough gray hair in this room to remember the first few institutional investor polls in fixed income. In the first couple of years that II broke out credit research by sector, Glenn was II ranked in 6 different categories, with #1 spots in many of them, including oils and gas, chemicals, airlines, autos, pipelines, just to name a few. I don't think since anyone has shown such range in II polls, and it's probably not going to happen again. After 10 years at Lehman, Glenn led a small group of analysts from Lehman to Deutsche Bank, continuing to write research along the way. But one thing that you have to realize about Glenn is that it isn't just the content, but the delivery that sets him apart from other analysts. My favorite anecdote is Glenn's trip to Australia in 1998. Now, as far as I know, Glenn had only been to Australia a handful of times, but I've confirmed that he is still famous in Australia 15 years later for standing up in front of a room full of investors and referring to the credit markets as hairier than a badger's ass. You just don't get that a lot in our business. I have many more anecdotes I could tell, but Mark asked me to keep this dignified. So, in late 1999, I actually started talking to some friends about writing content for their trading platform and figuring out a way to monetize that content separately. I mentioned it to Glenn, and he said, hey, that sounds interesting. I wouldn't mind talking with him as well. After a few meetings, we determined that doing it on our own was the way to go, and that's how the idea for CreditSights was born. In retrospect, it still sounds kind of crazy, and it probably was. I know, let's leave the street at absolutely the height of our careers and earnings power to start a company with totally unknown prospects and no salary. Sometimes it really is better to be lucky than smart. Or as Bart McDade said in a very gracious moment, no, it's better to be lucky and smart. CreditSights has grown to a global firm which strives every day to punch above its weight in the markets. And while Glenn is probably going to get up here and deliver the message that CreditSights is a team success, and it is, please make no mistake about it. There would not be a CreditSights today if it weren't for Glenn's leadership in building the company and keeping it together in the early days when our sales strategy was non-existent and it was questionable at times whether we would survive. And as we've grown as a team, we've had many employees with us since the very beginning who have been huge contributors to CreditSights' success. Maureen Dillon, who's here, was one of the original 8 founding employees of CreditSights. And sitting over at these combined tables are Chris Yuko, David Hendler, Louise Pirtle, Jim Finn, Selena Strong, Charles Moran, and Jim Sullivan, who are all here tonight and who have all had their 10th anniversaries here at CreditSights. You missed by a year, Hidden. And as we've grown as a team, the final point about Glenn I wanted to leave you with actually is his generosity with his time and knowledge, which Mark actually alluded to. When Glenn identifies someone who he thinks could be a great analyst, he spends hours with them, going over concepts, teaching them the tools and habits of good analysis, and pushing them harder than they've ever been pushed before. Analysts who Glenn have helped have gone on to run research at sell-side shops, at buy-side shops, at hedge funds, money managers, you name it. Some of them have even grown up to be the president of FIAZI. There is no question that he's tough. Put a couple of drinks in Mark Howard.
Back to short people. You scratch all the wax off that. That's just a really nice way of saying Irish pain in the ass. But thank you for those kind words, Peter. And thank you, Howard, for an awful long time. And the guy who we've chewed a lot of dirt on the same trail over the years at Lehman Brothers. I had the pleasure to work with him from the late 80s to the late 90s, and there was a lot of water under the bridge. Just one quick war story, just to put today's risky market. The next life of the prime computer bridge loan that almost blew up Lehman Brothers back then. It was definitely quite a trip. It's probably one of his early traumas, but Mark and I learned very early on that good research is far better than reassuring bankers any day. And because as we got up there and looked under the hood, we realized that the story wasn't always what it seemed to be for some time, and there were a lot of write-offs associated with that. That will go on his trauma checklist, though. Jack Melvey, another face from the past. We spent so much time with Jack. Jack really wrote the book on multi-credit asset strategy and fixed income strategy as well. And a lot of our products today are built off of what Jack did. I just always, when I'm talking to Louise, the strategist, what would Jack do in this situation? Whatever he would do it well, and he would do it with an excess of words, but all very meaningful words. But I always use Jack's rule. Rule number one, if you're a strategist, you better be talking to the sector analysts. If you're a sector analyst, you better be listening to the strategist and applying what he's telling you and put it in portfolio context. And he did that very well. He was always a great guy to brainstorm with back then. Again, he didn't use foul language, but there was never a shortage of things to talk about with Jack. Jack and I also were regularly in competition for the worst tan in CreditSights research department. We were the only two who would be glowing in the dark in July. I consider that a sign of hard work for an analyst. Most people just would shy away. But for tonight, in this award, it's the Hall of Fame award it's quite an honor. I do consider it somewhat of an ensemble cast award, though. Not full Fellowship of the Rings, but not orcs, somewhere kind of in the middle. And it's really a piece of this goes to everyone at CreditSights, because that's probably the main thing that distinguishes my resume. I mean, there's a lot of guys been breaking rocks in the pile for 20 years, analyzing credits, but CreditSights has been a special experience. After all, if you take a high-paying job, leave it to go work for nothing for a few years for equity, you're supposed to get an award or a key to a rubber room. And alternatively, your wife may decide to put the pillow over your face while you're sleeping. On that score, I have to thank Mary, my wife's here. It's not easy starting a business and eats up a lot of your days and weekends. For those who want to try it, feel free to chat with me. I always say knock yourself out, but you just might. That's the problem. And for my 4 kids, after 9/11, it was our first year of operation. We had to leave out of the neighborhood for close to 4 months, living in a little 2-room hotel, Daddy's up at, at this 2 in the morning on a landline connection, typing away, and the kids thought I was having a mental breakdown or something. I'm like, no, I'm writing the morning comments. Because, every day you have to make the donuts and get the product out, and it was a very, very interesting period. In terms of some of the people here tonight, and I talk about the people because as I look back over 30 years of my career, it's mostly a collection of people and memories and people reacting to events, and there was no shortage of crazy events the last 3 decades. Peter Pettis was always a top emerging market guy running around the world, bringing back currencies for my children. And, now he's going to be doing more work in Europe. Pretty soon he may have multiple currencies there to bring back also. Martha Dumont, who was always very good to Jack, myself, and obviously Mark and others. We have a number of former reports to her in the room today. Louise Pirtle, our top credit strategist, she's supposed to get together with Jack later and get advice on what it's like to work with crazy people in crazy markets. I think it'll serve her well. She's been a great asset. It's a tough job. David Hendler, our bank guy, he goes back to Drexel Burnham. So we have a lot of guys who have been around the block more than your average meter maid. And David, in his experience, he's famous for his one-on-ones with executives at brokerage firms. And he even got to get glowered at by Dick Fold. I didn't want to burst his bubble and say, he glowers at everybody. But they also got yelled at by Bear Stearns. He got me yelled at by Bear Stearns. It's a tough job, but he wades into the fray. And we have probably 16, 17 people doing banks globally. And I used to think, real men do industrials. I was a little biased. But I'm learning that banks is probably the toughest job out there right now, and it will be for some years. We have Maureen Dillon here, an administrative head, and the thing about Maureen is, that job in a small business, it's not easy. Peter and I were piloting a 1995 day U-Haul, stacking free tables from Star Media, which was having a going out of business, please carry it out sale. And then we occupied space by another blown-up.com, freeride.com. What a classic name, right? That's a sign of the times. But again, that's just also how much change has hit the marketplace. That was the TMT bubble. That was a great time to start a business. So if anyone does decide to go out and start your own research business, remember, it's just ready, set, go. Start doing it. The problem is you also have to say, please hold your hand up when you're burnt out. Or alternatively, every now and then you got to say, there's no crying in research. Get back to work. So, again, focus on the people, and the people over the years who have been in a lot of these situations that we talk about, bailouts at Lehman, multiple bailouts at Lehman, global change at Deutsche Bank, launching the euro, a lot of things. But I think back to some of the key people in your career. I echo Peter's sentiment about Chris Pettit at Lehman. Bart McDade was another amazing guy. He wrote the book on using credit research and beating up on his traders and making sure they stayed after work to study. You got to learn. You got to learn in the trenches, and you got to do your homework. And those are the kind of people you love to work with. George Hayward was a very interesting and dynamic trader at Lehman Brothers. Got to work with him. He's now palling around with Obama in the White House, I understand. One thing about him though was he was never risk averse. So occasionally I'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night early in my marriage, and she's like, "What's happened? I think George is long again." And at Deutsche Bank, Edson Mitchell, who sadly also left us early, he was quite a mercurial, memorable guy, and he allowed us to go ahead and build really a research group in 7 cities, which was reason enough to get out of the business and go start a company so I could cut back on my frequent flyer miles. So anyway, from here on in, there's going to be a lot more interesting times. We all know it. Every time I turn around, the world's like, you're just twirling flaming batons, trying not to burn yourself up in the process, trying to have a view on all these moving parts. But with the Volcker Rule coming, there's still going to be a huge, no matter how that shakes out, there's going to be a huge need for information. And I think all of us have to figure out how to apply it. We certainly have an axe in that as a firm. But the interesting thing, and the one, I always want to be positive in an event like this, but there's one you just got to you got to get out there. In the last 10 years, 12 years really, the thing I wouldn't do on the street or on the buy side is spend a lot of time going back and forth from Washington on different reform initiatives. And I got to say, as much as I think the regulators are trying to do the right thing, I've grown convinced that the average congressman has the financial market IQ of a mollusk. And so all I can say to you, if you watch C-SPAN very often, it's going to leave you depressed. Turn off the TV. It's just bad news. So either way, hold on to your hat. It's going to be a very interesting process in years ahead. Thank you. Glenn.
What Glenn didn't say is don't forget to vote for your mollusk this fall. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Pedro Salam, who will give us some fine words about Bob. Pedro?
I've been told no longer than 25 minutes or something like that as an introduction. Good evening. It's a great pleasure to be with you tonight to introduce Robert Auwaerter, Bob, on his induction into the Fiazi Hall of Fame. This honor recognizes his well-known accomplishments in fixed income portfolio management and analysis, and I suspect much of what he has done that may not be as widely known. And by the way, not only am I pleased for his sake, your recognition of his accomplishments and impact on the financial services industry also tells me that I've chosen my friends well. Bob and I have known each other for over 30 years, which probably classifies us as old cronies rather than just close friends. I should add, by the way, with a nod to full disclosure, that I had the pleasure, some might say the challenge, of working for Bob for the last 2 years of my working life. Bob is a native Philadelphian. After graduating with a Bachelor of Science degree in Finance from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania in 1977, he was off to the Kellogg Graduate School of Management of Northwestern University, where he earned both his Master of Business Administration degree in 1978 and the heart of his wife, Nancy. Bob's first job in the business was as a bond trader with Continental Illinois, working primarily on pension fund accounts. In 1979, he assumed management of the money market fund that Continental managed for Bache Halsey Stewart, known as Money Mart Assets. I first met Bob in 1981. A customer and friend called me to say that her husband, Ian McKinnon, had just joined Vanguard to lead Vanguard's new in-house fixed income effort, established to internalize the management of its municipal bond and money market funds. Back then, I was primarily a taxable money market salesperson. She suggested that I give Vanguard a call. Well, who could turn down a new account? And by the way, who knew? As Mark said earlier, $2 billion approximately in 1981, $650 billion in fixed income assets today. My mistake was going to work for Bob 3 or 4 years before, or 2 years before I retired, when the assets were continuing to grow so rapidly. Anyway, soon after, Bob joined Vanguard to manage the taxable money market funds. Later on, Bob also became manager of Vanguard's short-term corporate fund, with more funds and responsibilities to follow. When Ian McKinnon retired in 2003, after 22 successful years, Bob was the obvious choice to succeed Ian as Vanguard's head of fixed income. But I digress. Okay, it's back to 1981. It's time to call Bob to introduce myself. I'm in my 6th year with Salomon Brothers, perhaps also known as the Brothers Grimm in later years. I figure that the first call is chat 'em up time, and after all, I am calling from a firm with which Bob is already familiar. Nope, Bob was all about business. How long have you been in the business, Pedro? What can Pedro do for my funds? It took about 30 seconds to realize that he was among the most dedicated, direct, and thorough portfolio managers I had ever encountered. Clearly, Bob was committed to the goals and success of the portfolios he was managing. It wasn't just his money, it was someone else's money. And behind that money were people to whom he owed an almost sacred duty. Like the Blues Brothers, he was on a mission that continues to this day. He'll never let up. Anybody who tries to cover him knows that. And for Bob, fulfilling that mission has never been limited to waiting for investment opportunities to be presented to him and simply following the investment guidelines. Throughout the time I have known him, he has aggressively explored new investment media, worked to improve the risk profile of portfolios, and diligently pursued ways to enhance portfolio structure. Overall, I think it has been a combination of Bob's sense of mission, competitiveness, and anybody who's ever covered him can tell you he's competitive, intellectual curiosity, and remarkable capacity to absorb, retain, and analyze information that made him a top-notch, holistic portfolio manager and highly respected manager of many people engaged in many sectors of the fixed income securities markets. I should also point out from the start, Bob garnered the respect of the street. Now, those of you who aren't salespeople might be surprised to learn that salespeople talk about accounts on occasion, so we hear things. Among the salespeople I have known who also know Bob, and I suspect a lot of them either were or are afraid of Bob, to a person, all have made note of his knowledge and expertise, along with his unquestioned integrity and fair-mindedness. The result has been the development of relationships built on mutual respect and trust, and relationships of such quality benefit both the buy and sell side of the marketplace. As I reflect on my time in the financial securities industry, I think we may tend to define a person's success and contributions to our industry in terms of outward, easily identifiable signs or results. These can take the form of portfolio performance, academic or analytical achievements, awards, attention in the press, sales production, trading profits, and public and political influence. Bob, along with his colleagues at Vanguard, has certainly experienced such recognition by way of successful portfolio performance over many, many years. Awards, regular appearances in the press and on TV, testimony before Congress, meetings with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, meetings with the Fed, Treasury, and other regulators, and talks to various investment groups and societies. However, some of the most important contributions a person can make to the success and strength of one's own organization and the financial industry as a whole may go largely unrecognized. It seems to me that those who are natural leaders, who serve as role models, mentors, educators, and fair-minded competitors are among the best we have to offer. I believe Bob is one of those people. Thank you. And now I guess, Bob, you need to come up here. I'm a little disappointed because you don't get a tiara or a sash.
Okay, thank you, Pedro, for those kind remarks. It just shows you what you can get when you offer somebody a good dinner and drinks. But seriously, thank you to the board of directors of the society for this award. I view it as quite an honor to even be considered in the group of people who have received the award in the past. They've been business leaders, academics who advanced the level of knowledge in the industry, and of course, the two people who are receiving the award with me today. As Pedro mentioned, I joined the business in 1978. I just getting in just before Paul Volcker started to raise interest rates. I never would have guessed I would have still been dealing with him 30 years later, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I started as a money fund portfolio manager, and it was really fun buying CDs from good banks with yields above 20%. Now the money fund managers, my colleagues at Vanguard, they buy CDs with the same numbers in yield. Unfortunately, they moved the decimal place 2 places to the left. As Pedro mentioned, I worked in Chicago in 1980 when I was looking to make a career move at the same time that Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, was looking to internalize the money market function at Vanguard. So I really bugged the guy that he had hired to set up the fixed income group. It was Ian McKinnon, enough that he finally hired me. So he and I had a long and fruitful relationship until he retired in 2003. I would say it's really been a great ride at Vanguard. When I joined back in '81, Vanguard had, it's hard to believe, a total of $4 billion in assets, stocks, bonds, money market funds, fixed income group, just about roughly $2 billion. We now manage in the fixed income group $650 billion, and Vanguard has $2 trillion. I mean, it's just mind-boggling when you think about the numbers. And really, the success of the organization has been a testimony to its philosophies and values, but really its people. And I've been privileged over the many years, a little bit over 30 years, to really work with a great bunch of people, many of who were with me tonight that I've worked for over a decade. We work very hard hours, and I'm sure everybody else does in this room as well. This is a really tough business. But we challenge each other to really try to come up with the best decisions for the shareholder. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to work with them. And even occasionally we have fun, even with the tough markets that are out there that we've really experienced since 2008. We've had some difficult markets before, but nothing like the Great Recession that occurred since then. I just want to make really one comment about the business in general, and I think Glenn referenced it a little bit in his remarks. I think one unfortunate effect of the Great Recession, or however you want to term the financial crisis that we've gone through, is that the bond business is viewed by many as a major contributor to the problems that result in this country. And I just frankly don't believe that. And I think what has compounded this problem is really the lack of knowledge on the part of legislators, regulators, and the press. And I mentioned Paul Volcker, and I really think this is a prime example. Is the Volcker rule that it's been out there, it's been promulgated out there in the marketplace, and it's pretty well intentioned. That it's trying to avoid putting taxpayer money at risk if banks get themselves in trouble doing proprietary trading. But really, what's happened is that its sweeping reach has the potential to destroy the market making that we all rely upon in this room. And Pedro mentioned it, and I and my colleagues at Vanguard have just spent so much time in the last really couple of years talking to regulators in Capitol Hill on this issue, because they really don't understand how our business works. They look at us through an equity market lens. And I really think that we just have one opportunity to get it right. If you look at regulators, they're just under such extreme pressure right now. Depending on how you measure it, they probably have close to 400 new rules to write. And I think that once they finalize a rule, that the response is going to be, if we come back to them and saying, you didn't do a good job on this, is saying, look, I'm too tired, call me back in 10 years. And frankly, I would say that's why it's imperative to all of us in this room, but particularly the buy side, to weigh in and make our voices heard on these issues. Otherwise, I think we may be stuck with a lot of bad regulations for a long time. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who came out this evening, particularly the friends of Vanguard that came out to support us. I've really had the pleasure to work with a lot of you for many decades. I've worked with many people on the street, and I can be tough. I can be an SOB every once in a while, but there's a lot of people in the street that I truly feel are my friends, and I think that's the best thing that you can have in life. So bid you all a good evening, and thank you again for the award. So.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Great. That's heavy, right? That's great, Bob. Thank you very much for your words. And now I have the distinct honor to turn the podium over to Jack Malvey, former President Fiazi and also a Fiazi Fixed Income Hall of Fame member who will introduce Lim Chow Kiat. Jack?
Thank you, Mark, and it's great to see a trifecta of credit induction this evening. And anticipating Glenn's comment about wordiness, I'll try to keep this down to about 100 pages. You know, we're very lucky this evening to celebrate such a crew, and congratulations to Glenn and also to Bob. But tonight we also celebrate one of our profession's brightest stars, Chow Kiat Lim of the Government Investment Corporation of Singapore, by his induction into the Fixed Income Analyst Society's Hall of Fame class of 2012. Chow now holds the triple distinction of fittingly becoming our youngest, first international, and first sovereign wealth fund inductee into the Hall of Fame. Our Hall of Fame began 17 years ago with the introduction of our profession's living legend, Marty Leibovitz. I'm not sure if he's still here, but was delighted to see her earlier tonight. In a nice symmetry, Marty also serves as a member of GIC's International Advisory Board. Chow's well-deserved honor recognizes his contributions to asset management in the credit, asset allocation, portfolio construction, and risk arenas, as well as in helping define the modern practice of sovereign wealth fund management. Our ever-insightful Hall of Fame committee also could not pass up the chance to include our first genuine anti-killer, a Singaporean term of esteem used affectionately by some of his admiring colleagues, signifying Chow's great poise, good manners, and boyish good looks. To more fully appreciate Chow's success and knowing Chow shuns personal credit, we must set the context. We must give consideration to the Singapore story a little bit, as well as the founding of GIC. Rooted in the first world nation of Singapore, home to the fourth largest capital market, most CFAs per capita, I would argue, and the world's speediest border customs, and we thank you for that, GIC was founded in 1981 to preserve and enhance its reserve returns for the government on behalf of present and future generations, and they have succeeded. Few financial organizations have accomplished as much in the past 3 decades. GIC justifiably has become recognized for its vision, intelligence, deep emphasis on knowledge and analytics, collegial team-oriented culture, and its attention to detail. In other words, most of us longtime sell-siders wouldn't fit there. And indeed, no one other than GIC ever asked my old Lehman Index team for duration and convexity calculations out to 6 decimal places. Because of its success, GIC has become a global role model for the $10.5 trillion sovereign wealth fund industry, on its way to $20 to $30 trillion over the next decade. GIC's influence goes beyond sovereign wealth funds, as many plan sponsors and endowments have closely studied and emulated the GIC model. Traditional asset managers also have benefited by needing to improve their practices to meet GIC's exacting criteria. As one example of its innovation, GIC has adopted a 20-year horizon to generate returns over inflation. This novel objective, likely to be pursued by many, confers a decided advantage over the short-term emphasis of most organizations. GIC can take the risk out of acquiring out-of-favor investments. And so far, it's handily bested its benchmark by, I believe, just about 4% in the latest fiscal year disclosed. GIC's open team culture may be its greatest strength, for GIC has crafted an environment that fosters learning and mentoring and strives to be always in time for the future. Thinking back, and Glenn and Peter Pettis and some of us can remember some of our former colleagues in the 1980s who were always just in time for the past. You mentioned Mr. Haywood, and I'm thinking, I think I see an airline position up here, Glenn. For 2 decades, Chow has played an ever-expanding role in GIC's success. Hailing from a large family in Johor, Malaysia, that owned a plantation, Chow's schooling was in Singapore. He graduated with first-class honors in accounting from Nanyang University in 1993, whose logo of 4 interlocking hands symbolizes serve, learn, grow, and lead. This foundational guidance has become a template for his career. Rejecting job offers right out of university, for higher compensation, Chow enlisted at GIC to learn. Chow initially was dispatched to master the credit field, starting first in money markets and then moving out the curve into the corporate bond arena. This was a difficult task in the 1990s, coming at a time when the torrent of new information and new products generated a quickening evolution of the global credit markets. Many were carried off the credit field on their shields during this tumultuous era, and not all, contrary to what you may have heard, of the fallen were relying upon my advice. But Chow and his colleagues at GIC quickly combined a mastery of fundamental analysis with the latest credit quantitative techniques to optimize credit portfolio performance. Within a short period in the 1990s, he was viewed as a consummate credit practitioner. Recognizing his prodigious performance and his strong leadership, GIC promoted Chow into asset allocation to deploy his talents across multiple asset classes by the early part of last decade. He was well in front on the coronation of emerging markets as the asset class of choice for the early 21st century and possibly beyond. Within only a decade of joining GIC, he was anointed in 2003 as the head of the Fixed Income, Currency, and Commodities Department. Against the most trying backdrop of markets in 8 decades, and in further testimony to his talents, his career has blossomed over the past 5 years. It's hard to keep up with all his promotions. In 2008, he was elevated to Deputy President of GIC Asset Management. After a short tour in Europe, starting in 2009, as President of GIC's European operations and overseeing the Middle East and Africa, he returned to Singapore to join the Group Executive Committee as a Deputy Group Investment Officer and President of GIC Asset Management, with additional responsibility for guiding his firm's burgeoning investment in China. Along this industrious road, he collected a CFA and graduated from Stanford's executive program. This trail of rapid promotions does not do justice to the essence of Chow. According to colleagues, his great success owes much to his strong leadership, good humor, great humility, honorable conduct, positive outlook, and ability to bring teams together. And like all great capital market operators, Chow possesses an enormous curiosity that inspires a deep dedication to education and research. Indeed, internally, Chow's known as something of an Oprah Winfrey with his informal book club. When Chow likes a book, especially on capital markets, he'll often buy 100 or so and distribute them internally. Unfortunately, Chow's practices had unintended consequences. Apparently, some of his colleagues avoid buying new investment books, preferring to wait for Chow's generosity. I'm not sure you knew that. We obtained a copy of Chow's recent eclectic recommendations. All of these are out of print, which is not fully surprised, given that all the authors are FIASI members. The titles include The 10,000 Book on the Roots of the Great Recession, The Untold Story of Railroad Indentures in the 19th Century by Marty Fritzen, still missing the research for the FIASI Hall of Fame's physical location by Keith Anderson, who thinks there's a good chance that Atlantis and Noah's Ark will be found before the Hall of Fame. The Challenge of Debt Portfolio Management in a World Where the Number of My Books Exceeds All Outstanding Debt Securities by Frank Fabozzi, and my now less than classic Seasonality ad infinitum, Risk on Early and Late, Fade in the Middle. That's it. We eagerly wait Chow's eventual classic. In some ways, this book waiting is a metaphor for the global asset management industry. None of us here tonight can fully predict the nature of our wonderful profession in 2025, but we can predict with confidence that GIC, with Chow, will play a leading role and that our wait will be brief. In professional sports, induction into the Hall of Fame typically follows the end of a career. Nothing could be further from the truth for Chow. The best of his contributions to our vital global capital market industry are ahead, especially his adventures in leadership investing in China. Chow, our profession already has been enhanced by your outstanding contributions. May the next phase of your wonderful career be even more illustrious. To quote one of your colleagues, and perhaps the ultimate compliment, nice guys really do finish first, and they also get elected into the Hall of Fame. So on behalf of all of us here this evening, welcome Chow Kiat Lim to the FIASI Hall of Fame. Please all join in a rousing cheer for this remarkable young man.
Good evening. Thank you, Jack. You're so generous with the introduction. I've known you for almost 20 years now. I think we have discussed, debated over a great number of investment ideas, and I've always learned so much from you. Thank you for being a great supporter and a teacher. So tonight, I would like to first congratulate my fellow inductees, Bob and Glenn. It's such a great honor to be in such a company. This award to myself and to GIC, I think represents, an affirmation, a recognition of the many different efforts we have pursued over the years, the mission that we have. So later I'll talk a little bit about the work and mission of GIC, which I think Jack covered a little bit, but perhaps I could touch on some other aspects of it. But before that, I would like to thank FIACI, in particular President Mark Howard and the Hall of Fame Committee for the nomination and giving me this award. This is a huge honor, as I said. Your effort to advance fixed income research and portfolio management and in continuing education is very much admired, right, in GIC. And just as important, right, thanks for arranging such a lovely dinner that gave me a chance to meet up with many of my colleagues, my old colleagues, and many of our business partners. I would like to thank many of them, my long-term business partners, colleagues, for joining me here tonight for this dinner. Some of you actually have flown all the way from Singapore, right? Chiram, Debbie, Thomas. Thank you very much. I think your presence adds a lot of meaning and makes the whole event a lot more memorable for me, right? I think many years to come, I will think about the event tonight and all the nice, comments and congratulations that I got tonight. In particular, right, it's great to have my mentor, Eugene Boringer, here, and my former teammate, Peter Malahy. I think Gene, Pete, together with the larger GIC fixed income team, right, have been supporting me, right, in every way for so many years. Did great work, right, and together I think we did push the frontier a little bit, right, in the fixed income investing. So thank you. I should also thank my wife, right, my amazingly patient, indulging wife, who cannot be here, and my 3 daughters. I'm sure they are cheering for me in Singapore, right? It's too bad they can't be here. But they clearly have played a part, right, in, my sort of ability to travel, to do quite a bit of work over the last 15, 20 years. Now, as I said, I would like to talk a little bit about the mission and work of GIC. I think historically, and even till now, we keep a relatively low profile. I think many of our business partners here, of course, know us reasonably well, but perhaps, tonight I can share with you at least one aspect of the work that, or one aspect of the emphasis that we have, right, that maybe we haven't talked a whole lot about previously. And in particular, right, GIC's focus on professional advancement, right, in terms of getting better, right, at everything that we do, is really what I would consider this induction really recognizes. So I hope to give you a good idea of who we are, our tenets, and how we are preparing for the future. I'm also doing this partly for branding purpose, given the esteemed audience here. My guys in Singapore said that I have to do this, right, because this is kind of a rare opportunity to get, such a room full of very accomplished practitioners. So let me begin, right, with a quote from the late Dr. Goh Keng Swee, who is a founder of modern Singapore and GIC. Right? GIC is really his brainchild. So he said, and I quote, There's no real secret about the way in which nations and individuals grow rich. They must save a good part of their incomes and invest their savings profitably. The more you save and the more wisely you invest, the faster you get rich, unquote. So I think it sums up GIC's work pretty nicely, right? Our part is really to invest the savings wisely, to create wealth by professionally managing the national savings. So GIC, as noted by Jack, was set up in 1981. So as Bob said, right, that was the year when, U.S. Treasury yields were 14%. It's mouth-watering, right, looking at today's level. So we wanted, right, in fixed income language, to extend the duration of the small pool of Treasury bill investment we had. So we did this by investing in equities, in bonds, in real estate, and other long-term assets. It was good, clearly, to extend duration at that time, right, 14%, right, in all sorts of financial assets. We also wanted to build an organization that was singularly focused on long-term investing, right? There was no distraction, there was no excuses, right, for not focusing on long-term investing. So I think these were the two big considerations when we set up GIC, to do long-term investing and to do it in a focused manner. Now, since then, we have grown. We have grown from managing less than $1 billion to well over 100, from one asset class to 13, from one office to 9, from having 20 people to more than 1,200. We have now a buffer for economic vagaries. We have now a confidence anchor for our financial system, and we have now a steady stream of revenue for the Singapore government to fund its annual budget. So in the last 30 years or so, this is what we have achieved. Now, in this time of widespread systemic concern about fiscal difficulties, we are particularly, in GIC, we are particularly reminded of and grateful for that decision 31 years ago. So we celebrated our 30th anniversary last year and reflected on the past and the future. The future looks daunting, but at the same time exciting, right? It's daunting because we're entering the next 30 years with very low bond use and dividend use. But it is exciting at the same time because we are seeing the great rise of big countries like China, India, Brazil, right, where we are putting a lot of efforts in. As Jack alluded to, right, I have this responsibility of driving our effort in China, right? It's such an exciting job, right, that you go every 2 months or so, you meet different people, right, you kick the tires, you connect the dots, you try to figure out, the risk and the return, right? It's a great effort. Now, technology, right? I think Jack or Glenn or somebody mentioned that technology still promises significant changes. In fact, maybe at an accelerating pace. So I think faced with all this, GIC needs to maintain, right, a few things, right? We need to maintain our certainty of purpose, stick to our long-term orientation, and with the help of our business partners, some of which are here, right, to prepare early for the future. Internally, we have a saying, right? Our saying is that tomorrow is determined today, right? So there's no better time than to try and get ready for that. Now, in particular, we will need to remain committed to professional advancement. In that regard, this Hall of Fame induction is a great encouragement to us, right, to my team and the rest in the company. In pursuing professional excellence, our training in fixed income investing will prove useful to GIC. It will be useful not just in the area of bond investing, but also in other areas, and it has proven for me personally as I took on new responsibilities. The systematic approach, the quantitative rigor, the attention to wider macro developments, and the constant innovation to find better solutions are good training for any investment challenge. This, right, investing wisely with professional approach, as Dr. Goh said, is half of the secret of getting rich. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you, Chow Kiat. That was very insightful and very thoughtful. Before I conclude, I do want to just thank all of you for coming tonight, and particularly those firms who have made this a priority to sponsor this event and to show their support for the honorees. So thank you, all of you who stepped up and have bought tables and have supported this event. Without your support and your involvement, this dinner would not have happened. So thank you very much. I also want to recognize two people who have done a tremendous amount to make this a fun and successful evening. First, Ralph DeCesar, who's the Vice President of FIASI, who's the primary person responsible for all coordination and execution. Ralph, could you stand? Thank you. And second, Lauren, can you start walking up here? Lauren Nauser, please. Lauren is the Executive Director of FIASI, and over the last 7 years, she's played a very instrumental role in all aspects related to what we do, and in particular, the many, many hours to make this event come together and be successful, to run on schedule so that we all get home at a reasonable hour, and to make sure that we have a nice evening. Lauren Nauser has done a wonderful job over many years, particularly this year, so we wanted to thank Lauren with a little gift. So I just want to conclude with a couple of comments. I hope all of you got a chance to listen not only to Glenn and to Bob and to Chow Kiat, but to the introducers as well, because I think as we all think about our careers, we can learn a lot about how to conduct ourselves and how to think about the future from people who have accomplished as much as these three gentlemen have. And so I really want to thank each of them, and I want to suggest one more round of applause for all three of our honorees for their accomplishments. And last but not least, for those of you who did not get enough wine, I'm sorry I didn't keep getting poured. A few, maybe 50 of us, will be in the bar downstairs for an après party for anybody who would like. So thank you again for coming tonight.